All right, good morning. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming back, or just joining us for the Saturday morning session. I'm really excited that we're going to be hearing from ADE's Scholarly Editing, which is a really valuable resource to not only members of the ADE, but the larger scholarly community. So I'm just really excited to hear from our next panel, which is entitled Multimodality and Scholarly Editing, the Annual of the ADE. So I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Good morning, and I also thank you for coming this morning. My name is Sylvia Glick, and I am the outgoing director of publications for the ADE and a consulting editor for Scholarly Editing. And I will be moderating today's roundtable discussion. And I'm delighted to introduce 5 members of our editorial board of Scholarly Editing. Catherine Tomachek is a professor of history at Wheaton College in Massachusetts and co-editor-in-chief of Scholarly Editing. To her left is Raquel Baker, essays editor. She writes fiction, poetry, and literary criticism. Her writing has been published in the Journal of Pan-African Studies and is a professor at the University of California. Shelby Brewster, who is not yet on the screen, is joining us remote from Cologne, Germany. She received her PhD in theater and performance studies from the University of Pittsburgh. Her scholarly interests include environmental humanities, theories of posthumanism, and editorial and theory and practice. And her work has been published in Performance Research and Foundation, the International Review of Science Fiction. Jennifer Ishii will be joining us from Connecticut. She is the assistant managing editor at Scholarly Editing and a PhD candidate in early American history at Mississippi State University. Her research interests include material culture, religious history in the context of 18th century war and conflict, and women's history. And her work has been published in Pennsylvania History, a Journal of Mid-Atlantic Conflict, and the Journal of Academic Librarianship. And lastly, but by no means least, is Raf Viglianti, our technical editor and micro editions editor, holds a PhD in digital musicology from the Department of Digital Humanities at King's College in London, where he contributed to several major digitization and text encoding projects. In addition to adopting and developing new research method, he deliberately takes a multicultural perspective by engaging with multilingual content, facing the diverse realities of the constraint in accessing and creating digital scholarly content, and by adopting a global approach to teaching and learning. Raf is currently an elected member of the Text Encoding Initiative, Technical Council, and the technical editor, as I mentioned, of Scholarly Editing. And now we're delighted to get going, and Catherine's going to start us off.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm going to manipulate the Zoom here to get to the live screen, and there we are. So thank you so much for joining us at this early session. It's really lovely to see a crowd of happy morning faces. I'm just delighted to have the opportunity to speak with you in a session that has become a bit of a tradition for us at Scholarly Editing since its revival, as we check in with the membership at the conference to tell you a bit about our activities over the past year. And this year, it's even better since so many of us are able to be here in person. I can't believe this. And those who aren't able to be here can participate remotely. We actually got some good things out of the pandemic. Okay. So my goal this morning is to start off with a little bit of live show and tell. Oh, there's Shelby. Great. Thank you. Just to kind of refresh your memory about the current iteration of the journal. As you may recall, We have a beautiful web design that you can still see, even though we're being all technical. Yes, please do. Thank you. The web design is another thing that we can thank Raf Vilianti for. And I am going to show you in a minute under the Issues tab that you can find both our current and last year's volume, as well as issues from the previous iteration of the journal. We good now? Thank you so much. It's really important to have the help. So under the Issues tab, you can see we have volume 40, volume 39. I'm not good at scrolling. Here we are. And you can see the archived issues of the previous iteration of the journal. And under the About page, you can see that we expanded our editorial team. If we scroll down, again, Catherine scrolls. It's the live thing that's always such a joy, and I wanted to do it because it's a beautiful webpage. And so you can see that our editorial board has been expanded since volume 39. We're particularly interested in sustainability this time around, and especially in succession planning, which is one reason that we expanded the editorial team. Even before we started production of volume 39, we learned through discussions with previous editors, Andrew Jewell and Amanda Gailey, that their model of a tiny two-person editorial team was unsustainable. And our experiences of the production process for volume 39 both affirmed those discussions and helped us to see the need for additional editors in several areas. So we conducted a search for several additions to the team, and many of my colleagues in this session today joined us as a result of that search. Raquel Baker, to my left, and Atib Gul, who is not able to be with us today. He's off celebrating Eid. They joined our essay section, and the content of volume 40 benefited significantly both from Raquel's expertise in creative rememory and from Atib's focus on South Asian literature. It's important to both Noelle and me, and to the rest of our team, of course, to be sure to include both multilingual and international content. So you can see here under Voices and Perspectives, an interview conducted by Atib, and also you can see here an essay that Raquel did some significant developmental editing for. So Shelby Brewster joined the editorial team in reviews. If I scroll again, Catherine scrolls. It's important to me to narrate everything. Shelby came to the reviews section as a co-editor and ended up unexpectedly editing on her own for volume 40 to excellent effect. And Jennifer Ishii, Bob will tell you, is a wonderful co-managing editor who aided us in refining workflows and working on the organizational structure of the journal. She's going to talk about that in her presentation. Noelle and I came to the journal with a plan to expand the excellent space for publishing micro editions. Scroll again, Catherine. I live alone, so I talk to myself all the time when my cats aren't around. We wanted to expand the excellent space for publishing micro editions that Andrew Jewell and Amanda Gailey had produced between 2012 and 2017. We've worked from the beginning of our tenures as editors-in-chief to practice succession planning, as I said, and to ensure smooth transitions as membership of our editorial team has changed. That process continues. As soon as this conference ends, so this is where everybody's ears perk up because they want to do something else in their volunteer time. As soon as this conference ends, we want to begin to seek new editors for the pedagogy and for the reviews sections. And ideally, new team members will be able to join current editors, Eric Lamore and Shelby Brewster, for work on volume 41 to support our goals for smooth transitions. We continue our commitment to reflecting ongoing developments in the space of historical memory and recovery within scholarly editing. And we're particularly proud of the fact that volume 40 includes several essays that grew out of presentations at remote ADE conferences in the past couple of years. One of the essays is by Rupika Rassam, who was a keynote speaker at one of the conferences, and the piece by the artist Marcia X also came from a previous conference, as did the piece that is about the Perkins School, the archiving at the Perkins School for the Blind. We have wanted the journal to function in part as a contribution to public humanities, a field we heard mentioned yesterday by NEH Chair Shelley Lowe. We hope that the journal serves as a point of contact with the general public as well as the scholarly community to demonstrate the relevance of historical interests at a time when the humanities are. In this context, we see our work as supporting the humanities generally. As I say, I use the word context too many times, in a context that was also mentioned earlier in the conference, both on Wednesday and yesterday, as higher education becomes more and more focused on career training and loses track of the humanities as preparation for both life and work. We also hope to support the growing number of members of the general public who might not identify as editors per se, but nevertheless undertake tasks of historical memory and recovery as part of their work within their communities. That was the bulk. Before I close, I want to note that we also paid a consultant this year to evaluate the journal website for accessibility, and we hope to address those results in the coming year. Raf might say something about that. He doesn't have to. I should also note that we decided this year to adopt a rolling call for contributions, which I'm not going to take the time to scroll, but you can see a couple of spaces on the website where you can click to find information for how to contribute. As we turn our attention to volume 41, we have several pieces in the pipeline for publication, and we encourage contributions from presenters at this conference and participants as well. Information on how to contribute, as I said already, can be found on the website. We continue to be very grateful to the ADE for its support of our work. Thank you. Oh, and so let me help. Got it. So do stop share and then screen share again. There you go.
I'm not sure.
It'll work.
Okay. Not forget all the things here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for spending a portion of your morning with us. My name is Raquel Baker, and I joined the scholarly editing team as an essays editor as volume 39 was being finalized. The essays in volume 40 almost serve as a primer for scholarly editing's revival with volume 39, presenting key theoretical concerns of digital recovery, cultural recovery work, and digital archive intervention work. I would like to briefly present 3 methods used in and around volume 40 in support of scholarly editing's purpose to develop and advance textual and documentary editing. That works. As a digital public scholar and digital humanist, Rupika Rassam argues in an essay in volume 40 on reanimating digital histories
that mentorship serves as an important modality of disrupting the reproduction and amplification of historical patterns of exclusion. Mentorship is important to creating the conditions of possibility for expanding parameters of inquiry, as well as what texts are seen as culturally valuable. Rassam's goal of ensuring that editing and knowledge production practices, quote, do not reproduce the literary, historical, and cultural canons that have determined whose voices are worthy of preservation, and instead shed light on voices that have gone unheard, unquote, is underpinned by investments in mentorship. Scholarly Editing's statement of purpose showcases investments in mentoring by using best practices, such as explicitly inviting contributions from marginalized, silenced, or overlooked groups and people at all stages of their career. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Without such a well-constructed invitation, I certainly would not have applied to join the team. The call for editors similarly explicitly invited people from marginalized groups and at all levels of experience to apply. Investing in the mentorship of early career editors is fundamental to manifesting Scholarly Editing's commitment to expanding the practices, stories, and cultural artifacts centered in textual and documentary editing. Okay, all right. In addition to mentorship in the modality of senior editors fostering the development of early career editors such as myself, mentorship in the form of developing text before submitting them to the peer review process is also a key modality of creating the conditions of possibility for new voices and more expansive practices. For volume 40, I've worked with the artist Marcia X. I worked with her submission in what we might call in a workflow designation, developmental editing. But what I experienced more is witnessing and simply being in conversation with the artist. Last year, I facilitated the artist Marcia X's ADE conference panel and just fell in love with the project. I read the submitted essay less as an editor and more as a fan. For me, this shift in orientation from editor to fangirl geek, talking with the author about their ideas. Oh, sorry.
No, I think we're just on the phone.
Okay. About their ideas was a refreshingly decolonizing move that better allowed me to express my enthusiasm for the work and dialogue with the work in ways that I hope centered the value I saw in the essay outside of the question of whether it would be accepted for publication or not. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that this orientational shift in how I approach the essay is a best practice for developmental editing. I want to say that for this project, I experienced working with the artist Marcia X as a material form of the journal's Revivance goal of welcoming and making space for creative works of remembering. I experienced working with this essay as an intentional act of developing a scholarly community, one in which I myself can grow my own voice, and one that I hope enrich the artist Marcia's X voice as well. One that positions mentorship as an intentional act, not only of love, but also of survival. Because as Bianca Swift deftly points out in the essay, also in volume 40, Uncovering and Sustaining the Cultural Record, maintaining voice becomes more possible in the context of a robust community of reception. Here I echo the sentiment of Rupika Rasan and Kelly Baker Josephs in the introduction of the Digital Black Atlantic, as they describe the process of editing as simultaneously the process of claiming space for Black voices in digital scholarly spaces. Okay, let's see if I can get all the things moved. Okay. In addition to making critical investments in expanding whose voices are included as editors and knowledge producers, another key modality of scholarly editing's digital revivance is audience expansion. To welcome volume 39 into the world, co-editor Catherine Tomasek, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I presented at the Pacific Ancient and Modern Languages Association conference in Los Angeles. To best animate the goals of the journal, I thought about ways not simply to summarize and present the newly released volume, but also to work with some of the key animating issues in an accessible way. Playing on the conference theme of how the fantastic coexists with the quotidian, works with the idea, we work with the idea of ephemerality, which is perhaps more a concept about precarity than the fantastic or fanciful. But we also juxtapose that with the idea of the archive and work to provide more of a maker space to archive ephemeral and everyday aspects of the conference experience. Using foundational story elements, participants used observation and Toni Morrison's practice of rememory, defined by Rissam and Joseph as the practice of remembering a memory, and in doing so, actively reconstructing reality, to collect images that we later used to create collages and poems. This workshop was an attempt to work with the complex issues of experience and memory with our bodies to create an archive of that present moment. So the final thing I wanted to say, these are just kind of pictures of what we were doing in our little makerspace, kind of collecting images, smells, sounds, and then creating poems and other kind of art pieces. The editorial work of Revivance for me really centers around mentoring, creating communities of reception, and storing the archive. And I will stop here and welcome any questions at the end of this.
I think we're going to hear now from Shelby Brewster, our reviews editor.
Hi,
You're on,
everybody. Can
Shelby.
you hear me? Yes, good. Can you hear me? You can't hear me.
He has to unmute.
We hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Awesome. I'm going to try sharing my screen.
So
and
they can
see.
hear her on Zoom, but our friend
Oh,
is
but
coming
you
to help
can't
us.
hear me. Okay, cool.
Can you also tell her in the chat with me? Maybe somebody else is doing it. Oh, look at you. That's smart.
How it goes now?
How about now?
Yes.
Yeah, we hear.
Awesome.
Let me.
More volume, please. More volume, please.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen in a moment, but I do just want to say I am currently in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I don't have good internet. So if you lose me and I can't come back, please just carry on. So I will apologize in advance for that. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Okay, cool. So I just want to thank both Catherine and Raquel for their really lovely introductions to the work that we've all been doing together, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and talk about what we've been doing. So I come from a field that's perhaps not traditionally thought of as one that engages in scholarly editing. As Sylvia mentioned earlier, I'm from theater and performance studies, but I personally am really interested in the labor and philosophy of editing as an activity that scholars in many fields and disciplines are engaged in. They might use different words for it, but I think there is something that really unites different forms of knowledge production. And we've been talking about it in terms of recovery and rememory, as different folks have mentioned so far. So as Catherine mentioned, I came in also between 39 and 40, and want to just thank again the team for facilitating my onboarding that did not go as planned necessarily. So thanks again for everyone's support in that situation. So we ended up having 2 reviews in volume 40 that are very different from each other. First, we had Laura Mielke, who reviewed this wonderful new compact volume that I really encourage everyone to check out if you haven't yet, Publishing Scholarly Editions, which stood out to me for its practicality and its usefulness. It's really clear and concise discussion of the practice of editing, and Laura's review is just really fabulous. So I encourage you to check it out on the website and check out the book itself also. And then we had Mayan Armelin review a new digital project called Let Them Speak, that is a collection of Holocaust testimonies edited by Gabor Toth. So Mayan herself is not a documentary editor per se. She is an expert in Holocaust studies. That's her focus. So I appreciate her lending her expertise to this review, and you can find it again on our website. So similar to what Raquel just talked about, I have been thinking a lot about the reviews section and how it can contribute to the journal's revived mission, as well as just the function of reviews generally as a genre, what they are and what they're for. So I don't have any concrete answers about that. I have been thinking about it a lot, and I think it's a topic that we should talk about more as scholars. So one of the things I've been, of course, thinking about, as we all know, that one of the primary functions of review is to serve as recognition and legibility of our work to people who are not directly involved in our field, people like university admin. Reviews, of course, play a role in tenure processes and things like that. But beyond that, I really think about how reviews serve as a way to make connections within the scholarly ecosystem, across fields, within fields, across temporal and geographical gaps. And then something I really want to be thinking more about is a review as its own piece of scholarship, that a review can serve to create new knowledge, even as it reflects on the piece of scholarship that it's discussing. So here are some of the specific strategies I've been thinking about as reviews editor. First, similarly to what Raquel was discussing and Catherine was discussing about the essay section, thinking about widening the scope of content and temporal focus of the works that we review. I think the Holocaust database, Let Them Speak, is a good example of that. But also thinking about expanding the circle of potential reviewers to include folks in other disciplines, as well as folks at different career stages, or maybe folks who aren't even employed in traditional academic jobs. For example, Mayan is a graduate student, and it was a real joy to get to work with her on the review and through all the developmental processes we went through before publication. But the biggest strategy I've been working on is the way that editing has really changed in the last several years. And some of that, I think, involves the dramatic shift that many of us saw in our work during COVID. And so these two kind of go together in that it's important to set realistic goals for the journal itself, which ties into the sustainability conversation that Catherine mentioned we've been having a lot, but also to be patient and recognize that at this stage, editing something like a review section involves sending a lot of emails that may go unanswered. I think COVID and the way our workflows really changed, everyone had to think really hard about where they can direct their energies and the choices that they need to make. And I think that reviews were one of the first things to kind of fall as the low hanging fruit, I guess we can say, of things that folks decided, I don't have the space to focus on that. And so I think this ties with the point I mentioned earlier about thinking about what reviews are really for. So if we are thinking and can reconceptualize how we think about reviews as a piece of original scholarship and the important ways that it contributes to the conversation, that we can reorient how we think about it, and perhaps we will be able to have different kinds of goals and different things published in the journal. So I'm going to talk really quickly about what I'm working on for volume 41. So I am having a former colleague of mine, Chelsea Phillips, who's at Villanova, is going to be reviewing a digital project called Archival Gossip, which I'm really excited about for its discussion of gender and sexuality in print media, the late 19th and early 20th century. These are 3 other projects that I'm really interested in getting reviewed. I'm working on securing reviewers for them, but if you or anyone you know would be interested in doing that, please reach out to me. So, oh, too fast. The American Prison Writing Archive, which is a really substantial digital project that includes essays and other writings from incarcerated people across the United States. Caretha Mitchell just released this really exciting new version of Harriet Jacobs' Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl that just has come out in the last month. That is really exciting. And then finally, this Ghosts Over the Boiler is a really interesting project. It's a collection and reflection on a newsletter created and circulated by inmates on Alabama's death row. So those are the kind of projects that I'm looking to have reviews of to continue on with the journal's mission. So the last thing I just want to mention, if you have a project that you would like to see reviewed in the journal, if you're interested in writing a review or interested in joining the editorial team, as Catherine mentioned before, there will be a call coming out to add more folks to the team, but want to hear from you. So there's my email there on the screen. And thanks so much.
And we're now going to hear from Jennifer Ishii, who is the assistant managing editor of the journal.
Good morning. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Success. Wonderful. Let's minimize this. Well, good morning. Thank you for joining this session. As was mentioned, I work with Bob Ritter in the managerial editing aspect of the journal. Let's change this to, sorry about that. You know, Bob and I make a great team. We've decided we're both librarians and archivists at heart. So we love tasks that involve organization. So this is, it seems to be right in our wheelhouse. As many of you know from your own work on journals, the managing editors are tasked with the nuts and bolts of receiving submissions, shepherding them through the peer review process, and communicating between the authors and editors. I joined the team just as many of the other editors did, just as volume 39 was about to go into production. And at that time, Bob and I began discussing how we could streamline the workflow and improve methods of communication for the next volume. So I have a little list here of our goals that we set for ourselves. We were hoping to create templates and rubrics to assist the other editors in their tasks. And as Catherine mentioned, one of the unique challenges we faced was the changes in the editorial team structure, which included adding multiple new editors to the various sections. Here's a little screenshot of the editorial team and their functions at the beginning of volume 40. So we went from 5 editors to 12, which is a huge jump. And our editors were spread out across multiple international time zones. So obviously the communication pipeline between us all was of paramount importance. Excuse me. Allergies in Connecticut are just overwhelming. After some discussion with the executive editorial team, we honed in on 4 technologies that we wanted to use as tools to assist us in our workflows. The journal was already utilizing OJS in most regards as far as submissions, but sometimes not. So we decided to strictly utilize it for submissions and the peer review process for the upcoming edition. I'll talk more about the next 3 in detail, but briefly, we chose to use Asana as the main portal for communication within the editorial team. Google Docs and Spreadsheets to house the workflows and templates, and then we use Hypothesis IS in the final proofreading stage. There were really 2 main challenges that faced us with Volume 40, the workflows and the communication. Our workflow process is similar to most journals, but where the editorial team had encountered a bit of a hiccup previously was in defining what final editing looked like, which is similar to what other journals struggle with. They all felt there had been too much back and forth in the final stages, which was very stressful for everyone. So we wanted to work to limit that this go around. The goal was to complete the line editing, copy editing, and then smoothly transition onto the digital publishing part. We also wanted to include the new section editors in these processes to divide the final proofreading to those who were available. To streamline the workflows, we created 2 templates, which were in Google Docs for the co-editors in chief to utilize for 2 of the main points in the editorial process. This one on the left here is at the peer review stage. And then the one on the right kind of walks everyone through the line editing, the copy editing, and the production stage. So we had set points where we knew we had approval to move on to the next stage. And that seemed to be very important in our workflows to avoid confusion with so many editors. We also created a workflow spreadsheet that we could update with action items and review at our weekly editors meeting. We found this really helpful to have a visual to refer to. And this is just a screenshot of one that I took one day when we were having a meeting and I knew this presentation was coming up. So we would try to put in red things that we needed to do, in the next upcoming weeks and kind of where the piece was along in the process. But probably the most helpful technology that we used was Asana. Asana is one of the many project management tools out there. There are several. We used it to create portals, as you see here, like for each section of the journal, where the editors could go in there and communicate with each other, with the lead editors, and store versions of the submission. And we use this really throughout the life cycle of the submission process. And you see here, this is kind of an expanded view we would have at the top. These are, several of the submissions. We would have a list of submissions. You can see those over here as well, that these are the editors sections. And then at the top, we would include things like the status sheet that I just referred to, that we could always know where it was and refer to it. There was like a live Google link in here. This is such a far superior way to communicate with each other than traditional email, which we all received way too many of. We all knew that we could go to this and find the email strings of, what we were talking about with the specific volumes. And this is one other example. You see here, this is expanded out where under each submission, then you could have tasks that you assigned. And within those tasks, we could communicate with each other and then we could mark things off. Another wonderful thing about Asana is that we can now archive all the communications related to volume 40 and move on with a clean slate to volume 41. So the final kind of piece of technology that we used was Hypothesis, and this was Raf's idea, and it worked really well. This is not from our journal, it's just an example. Hypothesis allowed the editors and authors to annotate corrections directly on the preset version of the site, making it easier for the technical editors to make necessary changes. And this is also how we enabled the authors to communicate their proofing changes to us. There was a momentary learning curve, I'll be honest with that. But once we figured it all out, we realized it really is a great tool for communicating with the authors and within the team for this part of the workflow, you know, this kind of final piece. So in looking back over these managerial aspects of volume 40, Bob and I have concluded that there are, of course, always room for improvement. And there are things that worked well and some things that didn't. The use of spreadsheets and templates in Asana worked very well. We were all very pleased with that. Some of the things we hope to have, like weekly updates in Asana from all the editors, didn't always pan out, and I have to admit I was, you know, one of the worst ones for not doing that. So we'll have to revisit that idea. Scheduling meetings was obviously difficult with so many time zones in play, so that's something else we're going to continue to work on. Our future goals are things like obtaining image files sooner from the authors, so that the last phase of publishing is a bit easier. And then with the last volume, Bob and I had split up the submissions towards the end of the process, but I think this time we're going to just start shepherding the pieces individually sooner. And I think we think that might make the workflow go easier. And we also like to more fully utilize OJS's capabilities. So in conclusion, as the editorial team expanded, we found that utilizing these technologies to assist in communication workflow really did help the editorial process this go around. And welcome any questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay, and we're now going to hear from Raf on the more of the technical side of the journal, Raf, when we get the technical side fixed.
All right, let's see if I can make this work the way I need it. And I need this presentation here, slideshow. There you go. We're still, people on Zoom can still see my slides. Yes, I hope we're sharing. Okay. I'll get started in the meantime. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the technical editor of the journal, and as such, I would like to spend a few minutes to talk about some technical aspects, particularly the digital architecture that we put in place to facilitate our mission around preservation and sustainability. To ensure that the scholarship we publish on our journal can remain online or otherwise be accessible in the long term, we aim to make the online journal as resilient as possible from a technical perspective. So the scholarly editing website hosts the archived issues that were published between 2012 and 2017. Catherine already mentioned this, as well as the 2 new issues, volume 39 and volume 40, which was recently published just in April. Alongside essays, reviews, interviews, and more, each volume includes micro editions or small-scale digital editions that have been a distinctive feature of the journal since 2012. And I'm currently the editor for this section of the journal as well. As we will see, these present some unique challenges when it comes to software architecture. Let me talk about the journal a little bit. I'm sorry, I will get a little bit technical, but but not too much, I promise. And I hope it's useful also to understand the context of some of the other digital projects that you've been seeing so far at the conference that you will continue to see later today and tomorrow. So many solutions for publishing online journals require technologies such as a database, which enable complex features like user management, full text search, the possibility of generating website pages directly in response to user interaction in the browser. These are called server-side technologies because they operate on remote computers and users only see the results of their operations from their web browsers. There are several tools dedicated to journal management, and you may have heard of the popular OJS or Open Journal System that Jennifer mentioned a minute ago as well. In order to deploy and maintain these technologies, a journal needs access to reliable digital infrastructure. While these tools remain essential for managing the submission and review process while the journal is active, such as right now, in order to ensure the journal's availability online for the long term, we need to reduce the weight of infrastructure for the digital publication itself, that is the public-facing journal website. So I will be talking not so much about the tools that we use to work on a journal issue, but what keeps the website online. So the past 5 to 10 years have seen a resurgence of static websites, which nominally require less infrastructure to be published on the web, because once built, static sites do not need those server-side tools to function and can be easily moved and archived. Regardless of how a static site is built, the result is minimal infrastructure requirements. A server is always needed to publish something on the web, of course, but its role is limited to sending files over to the user's browser. This is cheap generally, and it makes it possible to rely on affordable web hosting, take advantage of free services, as we do actually with scholarly editing, or even use a home server. It's really web infrastructure at its simplest. Reducing dependency on infrastructure is motivated by tangible needs. When a project is dependent on web infrastructure made of several layers and moving parts, like in the stack I showed previously, it becomes necessary to keep them well lubricated over time, or eventually the stack will just stop working. A static site without server-side functions is easy to preserve as a simple file archive. The Internet Archive, a digital library of the web, is more likely to be able to preserve a static site without losing functionality. You can see that the homepage of the scholarly editing website has been archived by the Internet Archive over 1,000 times already. You can also find working archived copies of all the essays and micro editions in there. As a file archive, a static site is also portable. It can be easily transferred from a server to another without having to redeploy server-side software. And it can even be distributed outside of the web, for example, via USB drives, and offline versions become more easily conceivable, even though they take extra steps. So we don't have an offline version of scholarly editing, but if you're interested, let me know. Longevity, however, is perhaps the most immediate need of many digital publications. Reducing dependency on infrastructure makes a project more likely to remain available online because there is no active management required to keep the website running. This focus on longevity doesn't preclude the journal from relying on well-established tools for gathering content, managing communication, and coordinating peer review efforts. Jennifer has explained how essay form submissions to the journal are handled with OJS, and authors can use word processing software to do their work. Once the submission is completed, technical editor, that's me, and often helped by an assistant, currently Elaine Walker, we will convert and integrate the text into the journal website, which is static, is independent of OJS, and therefore easier to keep online long-term and to archive. The micro editions, as I mentioned, are more complex digital objects than the rest of the journal website. Scholarly editing micro editions are encoded according to the text encoding initiative format, which looks like the image on the right side of the slide. This encoding technology has been a de facto standard for digital editions and has a history of practice spanning almost 30 years. The reason for its success lies in its ability to capture or model not only the text of one or more sources being edited, but also editorial intervention to a great level of detail. This goes beyond, for example, the capabilities of a transcription done in Microsoft Word or in HTML, and provides a very effective means for single source publishing. From a TI document, one can write PDFs, ebooks, and of course, websites, etc. However, the TEI, and this may ring true if you have heard of it before, has a reputation for being complex to use and process. On one hand, authoring TEI can be streamlined just as much as creating an HTML version of an edition, but it typically requires dedicated and custom processing and infrastructure to be transformed into a website. In order to keep the online journal a static website, we can't rely on server-side transformations of the TEI. Instead, the TEI encoded text of the edition is embedded directly in the HTML, and we rely on sort of browser like JavaScript technologies and frameworks to perform operations directly in the user's browser. And as part of my work at the University of Maryland, where I'm currently working as a research software developer, I developed some dedicated tools to be able to do this, some of which have since been adopted by several projects in the TEI community. And if you're interested in knowing more about this, I can expand on them later, or please come find me. Yeah. Okay.
Ralph, well, that's happening. Can I ask you to repeat something about the XML files? You're not doing the transformation and storing that on a database and then delivering the transformation files. You've got the XML and it's dynamic on the client side that the transformation is happening.
Yes, that's correct. So it's actually sort of embedded in the web page. So when you're looking at the micro edition, you're actually looking at directly the TI behind the scenes.
Wow.
We're good now? Okay. Great. Yes, I will need it. Thanks. Okay, more on micro editions. So in order to fit our technical requirements for the micro editions, journal contributors and the technical editor have to work closely together to make these editions possible. The editorial work is, of course, at the heart of the micro edition and involves textual scholarship, tasks like transcription, collation, editorial intervention, all the things you're very familiar with. But anything that interests the source material directly will likely be encoded in the TEI, so in the XML. Other paratextual materials like introductions, notes to the text, editorial principles, they can be separate, let's say like documents, and we don't necessarily deal with them in XML. Okay. Except that those are not my slides, so can I ask? I'm just gonna guess what's going on here. I think. Well, I mean, I need to find the names and here, right? Sorry.
Yes, it's fairly amazing that we produce a digital edition.
I believe what happened is that the PDF has been shared, but we need to share the whole screen or Firefox. To the people on Zoom, I can send you the links to start the slides.
If you go to our website and you look at the journal, it will operate flawlessly. I promise.
So hopefully you can see them now. Okay. I'm almost done so that we have some time for discussion. Right. So yes, I was talking about micro editions here. I was talking about editorial work and how I sort of ends up being done together with the editors and the technical editor in order to make these complex artifact possible. Obviously, the editors focus more on the editorial work, but we sort of make some decisions together, especially around how it's going to go into the XML and what kind of functionalities we're going to have. So as a digital artifact, each micro edition will also have what it's sort of calling publication features, many of which will be interactive, bringing closer together to the reader the editorial work, contextual information, visualizations, and other traits of modern digital editions. So I have a couple on the slides here. It's a visualization, and on the right you can see, some information brought up about one of the people mentioned in the documents. But if you go on the Scholarly Editing website and play around with the micro editions, you can get a better sense of what publication features they include. Okay, to conclude, choosing a static site architecture for scholarly editing has arguably raised the technical development effort needed, particularly when compared with off-the-shelf solutions such as OJS for publication, and not just for submission and review, because OJS can also handle publication. But accommodating special content such as the micro editions is challenging no matter the architecture chosen. Most of the technical effort, however, was needed for volume 39 when the journal restarted after a short hiatus, and there was a need for a change of technology. Our efforts to reduce dependency on infrastructure for the sake of longevity has consequences on the editorial workflow that we adopted. For example, Jennifer has shown how we rely on annotating a proofing website using web annotation with hypothesis. Usually that's the kind of work. Maybe proofs are done on PDFs. For a lot of journals, we actually do it on a website, right? And scholarly editing is first of all an online journal, but we're still able to generate downloadable PDFs for those readers who prefer paper or Kindle. I'm actually reading my talk on paper, unlike everyone else at the table. So as we work on upcoming volumes, we continue to improve the journal's digital architecture and website. For example, we are committed to accessibility and are in the process of making necessary refinements to the website, as Catherine briefly mentioned, which we expect to implement in time for volume 41. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And we're now open to questions. If any of you have questions for any of our editors here or joining us remotely. Undine.
This is amazing, of course. And I've known things, of course, about what's going on with the journal for years now, but just really getting this kind of deep dive into the work that you're all doing and how you're doing it is really wonderful. But speaking of work, that's my question. I'm sure that you all are thinking about, in this context and other contexts in your busy lives, the labor piece of this. And it's very clear that you are investing a lot in making sure that this content comes out beautifully and really reflects the value of what the authors have done. So I just wonder what your thoughts are, what your thoughts have been while you're doing this about how to handle the labor part of producing something. I know it's a big question.
And for those online, I don't know if you could hear all of Undine's questions. She really is asking about the labor involved and how that gets handled and what the editor's thoughts are about that. Catherine, you want to start?
Sure, we're all volunteer, like many people who do this kind of work. We are so lucky that Raf works at the Maryland Institute for Technology and the Humanities and has control over his time and is able to devote the time that is needed for all of the back end of this beautiful, beautiful site that he has developed for us. And then there is the fact that the executive editorial team meets every Wednesday afternoon at 3:30 on Zoom, and the section editors join us once a month on a Wednesday afternoon. And I'm lucky to be moving to half-time in my teaching position. And that means that I will have more time to spend on all of this. Noelle stays up late at night to do all this work. We're super, super grateful to everybody who contributes. Yeah.
And I just want to add to that, I haven't properly introduced someone who isn't here, Noelle Baker, our co-editor in chief, who really does a tremendous amount of work, and to who we owe a huge debt of gratitude.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to say anything?
Rab, no? Okay.
Well, I mean, just briefly that, personally, it's also been an opportunity to experiment, and do sort of my own research in a way. So that somewhat, balances off, for sure. I think one concern is definitely sort of succession planning, and that's why we keep talking about it. We try to establish, good practices, document them. I think Jennifer has done such a great job and Bob as well, in sort of leaving enough documentation. Like, we're hoping that, when it's going to be time for next generation, that enough things are going to be in place that they can sort of keep working with what we established. I think when there was a hiatus with the journal, and Catherine can maybe say a little bit more about that, the problem was labor, the fact that it was too intense, and eventually they were like, we can't do it anymore. And so we want to avoid that situation if possible.
I can just say that the Kathy will appreciate this. The folks who work with TEI know that there is a lot of work that goes on between creating the archival copy, which is, very beautiful if you are happy with angle brackets, but it takes work to make that look pretty on the web. And that's what the micro editions are. As Raf was saying, that's what we do with the micro editions. The previous iteration was mostly micro editions, and Andrew Jewell did all of the work that needed to be done differently each time for each micro edition that was published. And that was utterly unsustainable. And, excuse me that my Texas is going to come out, but God bless him for being able to do it for 5 whole years. So that's just all I'll say. Yeah, sustainability is important, and so is succession planning.
Yeah, I just want to add that is one of the major considerations when we brought back the journal, was having a big enough team and spreading the work widely enough so that that it's sustainable. Yes, Connie.
We have a lot of new attendees for the first time at this conference, and I'm wondering, could you explain in more detail, what are you looking for in terms of submissions for a micro edition? How do you define what a micro edition is? Because perhaps some of the people here are doing work that could be submitted as a micro edition, but they don't know what it is and how you're doing it. So could you talk a little bit more about what is a micro edition? What are you looking for in terms of content? What the result is published, but newcomers may not know what that is.
Sure, I can say a little bit about that, but maybe Catherine can then back me up a little bit about sort of content, because what we're looking for, are small scale editions. And by that, I mean, it could be one document if it's relevant enough to a small number of documents. For example, one of the micro editions that we published, one was a short story, another one was selections from 2 issues of a journal from the 19th century Caribbean. So they tend to be focused, small scale, and they're usually accompanied by an essay that contextualizes them and explains why they're interesting, and in particular why they, meet the kind of content and issues that we are interested about in the journal. And so there is a lot of remediation work that we're trying to do. And I think that's what I think, Catherine can maybe say more, but I can say sort of in terms of size, what makes it micro is definitely the fact that it would be focused on smaller content. Another thing I want to say, since we had like the VIP NEH chair yesterday here, is that what has happened in the past is that these also become a way of putting together a prototype towards a larger project. So if you have a larger digital edition project in mind that you want to try out a small part of it, this could also be a place where to get started and then go to the NEH and say, look, we have a small prototype and we want to do something much bigger. Yeah.
I'm trying to find the place on the website where you can see what we have to say about micro editions. And here it is. What we say is that micro editions can range from a single document to 130 short documents or 2 variants of a single text. And we encourage people who want to propose a micro edition to be in touch with Raf earlier rather than later. He has more time in the summers than he does during the academic year proper to sort of help folks work on things. We have a number of possible we have maybe 1 or 2 possible micro editions in our back pockets in case we don't get enough folks inquiring about contributions, but I think we have 2 or 3 lined up already for volume 41, and we're delighted to talk to folks who have a fabulous letter or a collection of 30 letters that they would like to deal with. One thing that I would say to folks is that we get really excited when you've already done all your transcription. And might even have some files that we could start playing with. That's kind of the ideal situation.
Anyone else? Yes. And the question is, how can the ADE support the journal?
And one thing I would say is, so when we asked people to be on the advisory board, we asked for a commitment over 5 years to do at least 2 things for us. Submit an essay, submit a review, submit a micro edition. And we would encourage anybody within the ADE to do the same. Everything goes through peer review. So we do that process. If Bob or Jennifer contacts you with a request for review, say yes, and don't be me, which is I say yes and then I never get to it. And I'm a really bad ambassador in that kind of way. But Raf, you had something that you wanted to say?
No, I don't think so. The only thing that can that I didn't say earlier is about peer review, that the micro editions are peer reviewed as well. But definitely, also think about submitting essays and reviews, and we need sort of the more journal-like content as well, for sure.
Another thing I would say is that in addition to sort of regular kinds of essays, and that includes under the pedagogy section, and sort of regular kinds of reviews, we have these other 2 sections that we're very proud of. And this is Catherine tries to scroll again and fails miserably. Oh, there it is. Yay. So we have these 2 additional sections that we've developed since volume 39. One is called Uncovering and Sustaining the Cultural Record. And that's a place where you can write something short and less formal than usual, but it will be peer reviewed, about your experiences as editors. And so I was really thrilled in volume 40 to be able to include something that Connie and Holly Schulman had previously submitted, kind of under as a review of a technical tool that they use, a tool that they use called Doc Tracker, and that they, were able to talk to the developer about to help them with their, help them early on with their editorial projects. And it made me very, very, very happy to be able to demonstrate, as Mary Jo Klein was saying on Wednesday, that the things that we do when we edit for the web are not all that different from the things that we have been doing for all these many years, that you all have all been doing for all these many years, editing for letterpress. And I was really delighted that Holly Schulman mentioned, the very early model editions project. And that was super important work that was done a long time ago. And now it's hard to find that stuff on the web, which just goes back to that sustainability thing. I want to say, in addition to uncovering and sustaining the cultural record, we have a Voices and Perspectives section. I'm not going to try to scroll to it, but that's an interview section. And I was really lucky to get to be sort of listen in as Cristina Ramirez, who is in the English department at Arizona, talked to her dad about a project that she and he have been working on under the Hispanic Voices project that was mentioned yesterday in a session. And the interviews can be brilliantly interesting. So there are lots of different ways to contribute. You can be a scholar, you can be an editor, and you can also be a little less formal. And that's actually very helpful, we think, to the public humanities aspect.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sherry. And yeah, I just want to reiterate, we have a difficult time sometimes getting reviewers, and we know that it's a lot of work, but it really is a great contribution. And I think we're going to close now, and I just wanted to, oh, I'm sorry, you have a question.
One more real quick. Could you just, since we're all right here, could you just show us the best way to search your website for art?
We don't have a search function at the moment. So
Oh.
But we will. Yes.
you can browse sort of,
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Well, it looks like we're in good hands. You guys, so impressive.
Thank you. And I don't know why it seems to be digital projects hand out bookmarks, but we do have great bookmarks for those of you who still read print books. Okay, thank you very much.
From bookmarks to websites, we're truly multimodal. So thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and head off to our coffee break, which I just would like to thank the Society for History and the federal government for sponsoring. Thank you, everyone, and thanks to our excellent roundtable.